first things first is that we will go ahead and tear out our kitchen scale, and you want to make sure that your measurement units are set in grams. So the first thing that we'll use is psyllium husk powder. You can use psyllium husk flakes, but I found it doesn't quite absorb the water as readily. So again, by weight, we'll do 18 grams of psyllium husk powder. Ooh, we'll get that little bit of extra back in the bag. It is really important that this is spot on because this is going to replace our gluten in the bread. Next is ground flaxseed, and this one actually is not by weight. This is just going to be 2 tablespoons just with a dry measurement. We'll get that poured in there, and then it's time for water. And I found that using hot water instead of cold water works best. Here we're going to use 500 grams, and we will give it a mix and set it aside once we're all done. Almost there, 500, okay, 502. So I found this recipe online after I've tried multiple loaves. I've tried like a gluten-free soda loaf. I tried another yeasted loaf that just did not last very long at all. It started growing things and it was gross. So after a lot of research, I found this one and is by far my favorite. It is so easy to make. I literally just put the ingredients in the bread maker and let it do the work for me. So back to our gel. Now that I've got it all mixed and little clumps broken, set aside. Today I am milling my rice fresh, so I am taking the whole rice grain, putting it through this electric mill, and you basically put it in the hopper and it comes out as flour. And one of the benefits of milling your own grains, whether that's for wheat breads, oats, corn, whatever grain it might be, is that you get 100% of the nutrients and none of it's been like refined or stripped away, so you get all the fiber, the vitamins, the protein, the whole deal. And I'm just scooping out kind of an arbitrary amount of rice. I just want to make sure that I have enough to get to the 150 gram mark of brown rice flour that I need for this recipe in particular. So we'll get the lid back on and it will be back into the kitchen. With this particular mill, the Wonder Mill brand, you have to make sure that you turn the mill on first and then you add your grains in. And basically what it does is it feeds the grains from the hopper in the top. It goes through a set of mill plates and it comes out as flour. It's almost done here, and we'll just let it empty out before we turn it off, and we'll let it wind down. It really just kind of sounds like a plane engine. So we'll get it turned off. Okay, now it's time to measure out our rice flour since we made some. And again, for the brown rice flour, you need 150 grams of it by weight. So we'll get that scooped out. Next is oat flour, and I am almost out here, so I'll see what I can get out of here, but I have a feeling that we will also be making our own oat flour. Although this recipe for DIY oat flour is a lot simpler. All you have to do is put some oats in a blender and get it to a fine enough consistency. Oatmeal is by far my daughter's favorite meal, and she has it just about every single day for breakfast, so the excitement is quite real for her. We'll get that plugged in, not until we're ready though. We'll have her turn it on and just blitz it until it gets to a relatively fine consistency. It doesn't have to be perfect because before we mix our ingredients together, we'll put it through a sifter. Okay, back to the oats. So we got our oat flour, we'll finish measuring that out. And for oat flour, you want to make sure that you do no more than 100 grams. So actually, I use exactly 100 grams. And then the last of your whole grains is just 30 grams of corn flour. And I'm just using the store-bought masa flour here. Next comes our starches. These can really absorb water, so we may have to add extra water in the end. I'm going to do 75 grams of cornstarch by weight, and also 75 grams of potato starch. And I found that a lot of times it's easier to get your ingredients in bulk online. I actually got this potato starch specifically from Amazon, and I think it cost me about $25 or so. All in all, really good price for the amount that I was able to get. And that's the last of our ingredients that we have to do by weight. Everything else is by dry measurement. So for salt, we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons. And we'll put that on one side of the container. We don't want it to mix in with the yeast, because from what I've heard, that can like deactivate it. So it was just easier to pour it into this little cup and then go ahead and measure it out. So salt. And we'll get the rest. I think I used a 3/4 measurement here, so that's why you see me doing it twice. And then yeast is also the same amount, 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. So I'll just use my little 3/4 measurement twice. And of course, I will put the recipe and instructions in the description box below, along with links to several of the products that I've used today, just because I found them at such a great price online. And then you'll just do 1 teaspoon of sugar, and basically the sugar is eaten by the yeast, and as the yeast metabolizes the sugar, one of the byproducts is carbon dioxide, and that's what gives the rise to the bread. And then just 1 tablespoon of olive oil. This is just regular olive oil, but any neutral oil will work. Just not extra virgin, because that can add an odd flavor. Next, I'm pouring in our slurry gel mix from the psyllium and the flax, and you can see just how much it is thickened up. The longer it sits, the thicker it will get. So I get the rest of that into my bread maker pan, and you can do this in a different container if you want, but I found it saves you some cleanup work if you just go ahead and do it straight into your bread pan. And here I'm sifting my dry ingredients. It's important that you sift this, especially because those starches can clump up, and because it's gluten-free bread, they just don't quite mix in as well with the paddles alone, so it's good to kind of give it a head start by sifting. But you'll also see in a second that we're going to go ahead and mix our ingredients together, but not completely, just enough to get the dry incorporated into the wet. I realized after mixing that it just felt a little stodgy and dry, so I actually added a fair amount of water, but going back and seeing this after some edits I've made, I am going to try reducing the water along with a couple other adjusted settings, but I will talk about that at the end. So we'll get a little toddler help. She loves helping to cook in the kitchen, so I'm more than happy to show her. We'll put this in the bread maker, and it's important that you use memory settings on your bread maker, whatever brand it is, to accommodate a gluten-free loaf, just because it doesn't need a double proving cycle. It doesn't need to be preheated. You want to make sure that you have that very specifically set so that your bread turns out. So it's kneading, and next thing you know, it will be done baking. Here we are. We'll open up, and it smells just like a regular loaf, although you might notice that it looks a little purple, and that's actually from the psyllium husk powder. Absolutely no harm to you. It's just a color difference because of the way it looks before it's ground. So because this is a gluten-free bread, it is critical that you let it sit and cool completely, roughly an hour or so, before slicing into it, because if that steam escapes too early, and it can actually offset your structure, and your bread just does not turn out right. So you can see here with this loaf that it's a little close textured, and I ended up finding out that this was because I had too much water, too much of a proving time, and under baking. So I made some adjustments that I will leave in the description box. I'd suggest going ahead and slicing your bread, separating it with wax paper, and then storing it in a bread bag in the freezer. That way you can thaw it whenever you're ready to use. Hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, the best way to show that is by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a comment down below. Let me know if you've tried it. See you next time.